Imagine someone giving you a survival guide, but upon opening it, you discover that all the information is blacked out except one line on the last page, which reads, "If it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down." This rhyme, often repeated to teach people how to survive a bear attack, is admittedly useful, but also extremely problematic. And not only because black bears are often brown and brown bears can also be black, the main issue is this tip omits the critical information on how to prevent being attacked in the first place, which I think we'd all agree would be our preference. After hundreds of bear encounters, I've long felt that we need a new system, one that is also relatively easy to remember, but that places the emphasis on preventing attacks. That's the purpose of today's video. These are the bear attack ABCs. Learn them well and follow them closely, and I can almost guarantee that you'll never even have to worry about whether you should, quote, fight back or lie down. But just to make sure we have our bases covered, we're going to go over best practices to survive a bear attack as well. Before we begin, I want to thank Daniel for sharing the term layer your defenses in his comment on my previous video in this series. That is exactly what we're going to be discussing today. And even if you think that you're well versed in bear safe practices, I encourage you to watch this video in its entirety. We'll start with some familiar basics, but I think even the most seasoned adventurers will find there's always more to learn. I also want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. You are some of my favorite people. If you haven't yet joined the Wild Spaces team, then subscribe and please consider contributing on Patreon. Bears are the largest terrestrial predators on Earth, and you are wise to nurture a healthy respect for them. But knowledgeable and responsible travelers have a lot more control in bear country than most people realize. And it begins with the 2 A's of bear safety: awareness and avoidance. Being aware of bear safety protocols and your backcountry surroundings is honestly 95% of bear safety. While short, snappy sayings like "if it's black, fight back" and so on are easy to remember, they can actually set you up for an attack if you're not sufficiently aware of attack prevention protocols. The most important of which is traveling in groups of 2 or more responsible people. Traveling with knowledgeable, responsible companions is bar none your absolute best backcountry defense, and we'll discuss why in the next few minutes. Beyond traveling in responsible groups, being bear aware means, as I'm sure many of you have heard, keeping a clean camp by managing waste and properly storing food. Which is great news because responsible travelers already practice leave no trace principles. Just know that storage protocols can vary from place to place because bears are pretty smart and some bear populations have learned workarounds. So make sure to consult the Park Service or Forest Service and Wildlife Services responsible for the areas you intend to visit. Now, because I spend serious time in both black bear and grizzly country, including with my family, I absolutely refuse to let food come anywhere near my tents and sleeping gear, ever. In fact, avoid bringing or keeping scented items of any kind in your tent, especially at night. Bears have an unrivaled sense of smell. Even if you don't detect attractants in or near your tent or bedding, bears can if you don't take basic precautions. Being mindful of potential attractants is double important in the backcountry, where you may be hours or even days from help or extraction if something goes wrong. You don't need to be paranoid, just responsible. In grizzly country, this can mean cooking, eating, and properly storing your food and trash as much as 100 yards from your backcountry campsite. In developed areas, this means following posted bear precautions to the letter. I also advise that you sleep in different clothes than those in which you prep and eat your food. This may seem excessive, but you are at your most vulnerable when asleep in your tent. And while nighttime attacks are exceptionally rare, you never want to incentivize any investigation of your sleeping area by a bear. For extra security, consider using a portable electric bear fence. Some systems weigh only a few pounds and have been shown to be extremely effective at keeping people and their gear safe from prowling bears. Also know that activities where you move rapidly through the landscape, like trail running or mountain biking, increase the likelihood of a surprise encounter, and thus increase the likelihood of an attack. Bear encounters are also complicated by the presence of a dog, even a well-trained dog. If you haven't already, make sure to watch my full video on how dogs cause bear attacks. Now, the final points of awareness deal with reading and interpreting the landscape and understanding bear behavior. Wind direction, terrain, ambient noise, and low visibility can all reduce your or a bear's ability to avoid a dangerous encounter. So, while moving through the backcountry, make noise appropriately. Please don't wear bear bells. There's very little evidence that they work to ward off bears, and rather annoyingly, they make you sound like one of Santa's reindeer, which would be fine if you were at a children's Christmas pageant. But in a wilderness setting, they're about as appropriate as an echoing belch during wedding vows. It's also completely unnecessary to assault the wilderness by making noise excessively. Doing so will almost certainly scare all animals away, as well as disturb others who are trying to enjoy the natural soundscape. Clapping and calling out can be calibrated based on your surroundings, and more importantly, forces you to remain engaged with your environment, which is a good thing. Practice keeping your eyes and ears up. There's absolutely no substitute for situational awareness. But it's also a developed skill that comes with time and practice. By traveling in groups, you don't only discourage potentially aggressive bears with your numbers, but you layer your situational awareness and your ability to respond to a dangerous situation. Traveling with responsible companions is every bit as much about intervening during a bear attack as it is preventing a bear attack. And 3 appears to be the magic number. 3 responsible people who adhere to bear safety practices are practically guaranteed to avoid bear-inflicted injury. But, statistically speaking, 2 people who know what they're doing are almost guaranteed to avoid bear-inflicted injury as well. Now, before discussing the next layer of defense, I need to say something more about avoidance, because the internet seems designed to deceive and endanger people. By democratizing information in an attempt to profit from social bias, the internet has warped our very perception of reality by conditioning us to confuse popularity with validity. Some things are not subject to popularity tests. There's an unbelievable amount of dangerous and yet popular advice out there, and some of it's incredibly seductive. There are hordes of people who think a practice is safe or responsible because some Alaska guide or hunter suggests it. In truth, there are tons of wilderness guides and hunters who court disaster every time they enter the backcountry. In fact, hunters and guides constitute one of the largest cross-sections of bear attack victims. And yes, a large part of that is because they're out there in the woods, and hunting in particular increases the odds of conflicts with bears. But it's also because of bad habits and bad advice that have been embraced by many in the outdoor community. If you followed At Home in Wild Spaces long, you know that one of my bedrock tenets is that experience is a mirage. Rather than resulting in competence, familiarity oftentimes breeds complacency, neglect, and false security. The universe rarely punishes complacency with immediate prejudice. Just think of all the people who text while driving and yet still reach their destination despite the risk they've imposed on themselves and others. Without immediate consequence, hazardous behavior becomes ingrained. There are tons of people who wander around the woods behaving contrary to bear-safe practices, sometimes for decades without injury. Think of Timothy Treadwell, who wandered Katmai willfully ignoring bear safety protocols for 13 years before he was attacked and killed. Sometimes the universe gives you a pass, whether you deserve it or not, and sometimes your readiness is tested, and regardless of their depth of experience, many fail that test, sabotaged by complacency or by following hazardous but popular advice. So, beware the twin mirages of experience and popularity, and avoid bad advice by staying tuned to At Home in Wild Spaces. So we've covered awareness and avoidance, the 2 A's of bear safety. Let's move on to our next layer of defense. Even if you do everything in your power to avoid a dangerous encounter, you need to be ready to respond should you come face to face with a bear. There are some additional tools like bear flares and bear horns that we may discuss in future videos. But today we're focusing on the 2 main deterrents in bear country, which brings us to the letter B: bear spray and boomsticks. Now, I freely admit that boomstick is a pretty clumsy term, and probably more than a little juvenile. but it begins with the letter B and should be easy to remember. There is a mindless debate raging over which of these tools is, quote, better. We're not going to participate in that debate today because I've already definitively answered that question in my guns versus bear spray video, so make sure to check it out. Today's message is that neither bear spray nor the most powerful gun is a genie in a bottle. And regardless of what you carry, you have to train your mind and body to deploy them effectively. We're going to start with bear spray. It's highly effective, relatively easy to master, non-lethal to humans and bears alike, and far less expensive than firearms. Which, yes, means it's the deterrent that every adult should carry when in the backcountry. Now keep in mind, if you choose to travel alone, regardless of what deterrents you carry, you are going to be significantly more vulnerable than people who travel in responsible groups. The majority of bear attacks involve grizzlies, and the vast majority of grizzly attacks are the result of surprise encounters, meaning that there may be very little to no time to prep and deploy your deterrent if you stumble upon a bear. You can mitigate that risk by being attuned to your surroundings, making noise appropriately, and carrying your spray in one of 4 locations: on your chest, hip, in your front pocket, or in your hand. Never, repeat, never carry your bear spray in your backpack where it is not immediately accessible. Of these 4 locations, I find the chest to be the least intuitive place from which to deploy bear spray, especially if I'm carrying my 10mm semi-auto in my chest holster. But if I'm not carrying my gun, more often than not I will carry my bear spray on my chest because it's more secure during vigorous activities like trail running or mountain biking. When hiking, it's generally quicker to draw and ready my bear spray from my hip or my front pocket. You'll have to spend some time training in order to decide which passive carry location works best for you. But if you're alone or traveling through heavy cover or in an area with a lot of ambient noise, particularly in brown bear country, I advise that you carry your bear spray in your dominant hand with your index finger through the loop and your thumb on the safety clip as a precautionary measure. This active carry position will minimize the steps and time needed to deploy should the need arise. And yes, you'll often probably end up carrying your bear spray needlessly. But if you run into a bear, you'll be glad you gave yourself an advantage by actively carrying your bear spray. Even if you are extremely proficient, I strongly discourage carrying a gun in this manner. Defensively speaking, your gun should remain holstered until you know a threat exists. Making the call on whether your deterrent is needed will depend on your read of the situation. We'll run through some real-world examples in a minute, but as a rule, if you encounter bear sign in the form of scat, a dig site, tree markings, cubs, or a cached carcass, then ensure your bear spray is at least in your hand and that you are grouped with your travel companions. If you see a bear, readying your deterrent for deployment is your first priority, regardless of the bear's behavior. Chances are very good that the bear will leave the area without conflict, but if it does charge, you'll be ready. If the bear doesn't leave, but is also not behaving aggressively, slowly back away and leave the area, keeping your deterrent ready should the bear's behavior change. It's very possible that the bear is just passing by. Bears are in fact mostly peaceful creatures who are generally risk averse. Remain calm, but yield the right of way and give the bear plenty of space to pass. Crowding a bear or failing to give it ample space or restricting its movements is extremely irresponsible and can trigger aggression. Some say that you should talk to the bear in a calm voice to let it know that you're human and that there's no cause for alarm. I'm not sure how useful this ritual is, but sure, go ahead and talk to the bear as long as you have your deterrent ready. If the bear approaches you or shows aggression by growling, huffing, slapping the ground, or charging, you can step up your warnings. According to world-leading bear biologist Tom Smith, you can be aggressive, even towards a grizzly. Scream, throw rocks, fire warning shots, but you'd better be able to back that up with either bear spray or lethal force. Otherwise, they'll call your bluff. Let's use this encounter to illustrate. A group of, as far as I can tell, 3 people encountered multiple large coastal brown bears, one of which charged the group from a great distance. The people seen here did a good job of standing their ground, staying close together, and making noise to intimidate the bear. Their defense proved to be enough, but I don't see any bear spray or other deterrents. Were it possible to rewind this event and confront this bear all over again, having bear spray out and ready for use would be very wise. Bears will generally avoid conflicts, and like this bear, typically veer off before making contact or coming within range of bear spray. But bears are not all alike, and that includes bears of the same species. Some bears will be relatively easy to deter. Others, like those protecting offspring or a food source, or who have been wounded, are often much harder to deter. So, with your deterrent ready, keep your eyes on the bear and monitor its behavior for signs of aggression, while first backing away slowly. If it approaches aggressively or charges, stand your ground and deploy your deterrent if necessary. Never, ever run from a bear. Alright, let's now cover how to use bear spray. Depending on brand and the size of your canister, bear spray is rated for up to 40 feet. But real-world ranges do vary depending on the age of the canister, wind, weather conditions, and temperature. In strong winds, the effective range of your spray may be as little as 5 or 6 feet. If a bear charges you, spray a short initial burst, followed by a second, and so on if necessary. Upon reaching the cloud of spray, most bears should retreat. But it's also very possible that the bear will veer off before coming within range of the spray, in which case you'll be happy that your canister isn't empty. If the bear continues through the cloud, keep spraying, keeping in mind that this is all likely to happen very fast and possibly in waves, depending on how invested the bear is in driving you off or attacking. This is also why I strongly advise that you spend some time practicing, ideally with an inert canister first. Like other videos in this series, I've included links to both practice canisters and EPA-approved bear spray canisters in the description, along with other relevant training tools. This is not a sponsored video, but your purchases will support more videos like this one. Let's look at some real-world examples, starting with this video captured by a hunter in, I believe, Russia. For those of you who have watched my video on how dogs cause bear attacks, you'll recognize the dog barking as an ominous indicator of what's about to happen. As expected, it doesn't take long for the bear to turn its aggression from the dog towards the hunter, who is armed with what looks like a double-barrel shotgun. Depending on what type of ammunition he has loaded, a shotgun can be an effective tool, and a warning shot is decently likely to scare the bear off. But I suspect his gun is loaded with birdshot, which is far from ideal, particularly in a gun that carries only 2 rounds. You'll notice the bear charges repeatedly, sometimes coming within bear spray range, and sometimes stopping just beyond. If you're all by yourself, you're going to want to time your shots carefully. A good hit with bear spray would have almost certainly sent the bear on its way, but people do miss. Again, having discussed the efficacy of bear spray extensively with one of the world's leading authorities on bear attacks, Tom Smith told me, quote, "I ran the numbers. Our newest data says it's almost 100% effective at stopping bears. And where the bear spray doesn't stop them, it was chaotic, they didn't get it out in time, or they sprayed it off in the wrong direction." There are also a couple cases where the bear charged at full speed through the cloud of spray and ran the person over. But in some cases, the spray seems to have had some residual benefits, which we'll discuss more in my upcoming video on Todd Orr's experience. Bears are visual predators, and their primary weapon is their mouth, armed with massive canines and bone-crushing jaws. But that means at close range that they are extremely vulnerable to a direct blast of bear spray. If a bear intends to attack, its ears will likely be flattened, its eyes fixed on you, and its mouth gaping. If you are able to land a solid blast of spray, it's a practical certainty that you will discourage further aggression, and a heavy deposit will very likely incapacitate the bear. More than that, if you or someone in your party is carrying and sufficiently proficient with an appropriate firearm, you've likely handicapped the bear with the spray and now given yourself a strategic advantage if the threat persists. That's how Tom Smith advises people generally deal with aggressive bears, especially in groups of 2 or more. Line everyone up, he says, including those with long and short guns. Spray the bear first, and if the bear keeps coming, shoot it. There are loads of frustrating absurdities inherent in the mind-numbing debate over whether a gun or bear spray is, quote, better. Among them are people who forego bear spray because they've failed to thoroughly educate themselves on its value. Or worse, are just looking for an excuse to shoot a bear. Rather than rivals, bear spray and the right gun in the right hands work very well in concert as part of a layered defense strategy. Those who master both and adhere to the other protocols listed in this video enjoy an unrivaled level of defensive flexibility should the unlikely become reality and they are forced to deal with an aggressive bear. In the right hands, an appropriate gun is an unquestionable asset. But there are reasons that serious statistical analysis has repeatedly found that gun users are generally less successful in deterring bears and suffer drastically higher injury and fatality rates compared with bear spray users. It really comes down to the individual and whether or not they are sufficiently skilled with an appropriate firearm. That kind of skill requires thousands of dollars of investment and hundreds of hours of meaningful training and practice. If merited, warning shots can be very effective at scaring off even mother grizzlies, as was the case for Fred Eichler when on a hunting trip in Alaska. He and his party encountered 3 brown bear cubs along the river they were floating, which is basically the backcountry equivalent of an air raid siren. While trying to scare the cubs off, Mama Bear tore out of the brush like a freight train. It's hard to know if Eichler's guide had previously drawn his gun, but even with ample warning, he was not in a fire-ready position. Despite that disadvantage, he managed to fire a shot into the water, which made the sow immediately reconsider. Seconds after the encounter ended, the guide said, "I was going to have to shoot her with the next shot." Except there never would have been a next shot. The sow was maybe 10 feet away when the shot was fired, and right next to their craft when she turned around. If she had continued at full charge, there would almost certainly not have been enough time to cycle the next round through what looks like a 44 or 500 Magnum revolver. But more definitively, according to Fred Eichler himself, his guide's gun jammed after that one shot, meaning even if the guide was the world's fastest shooter, there was never going to be a follow-up had the sow attacked. There's also a moment where the sow seems to contemplate a second assault, but turns and retreats into the woods. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know for sure, but I expect that had Fred Eichler's guide not been grouped with, in this case, 3 other people, that Mama Bear would have been a lot more likely to charge a second time, and he would have likely been screwed. It was the layered defense of traveling in a group and, yes, being able to fire a warning shot that worked to deter this mother brown bear. Having watched Eichler's full video, there's no mention of bear spray, which I interpret as there was no bear spray present. If that's true, I cannot fathom why anyone would self-impose that kind of a handicap on their defensive options in bear country. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, especially in brown bear country. There is no intelligent reason to not carry and be proficient with bear spray. Guns absolutely have their place, but that conversation is far more nuanced and more serious than most of the internet would have you believe. I'm not here to tell you to carry a gun or to not carry a gun. What I can tell you is that not everyone should carry a gun, and that practiced, repeatable proficiency with the right gun is required before you can reliably ward off or, if necessary, eliminate an aggressive bear. If you decide to carry a gun for self-defense, take safety and your training seriously. Otherwise, you're just going to be a liability rather than an asset. Contrary to what you may have heard some celebrity influencer say, bears kill approximately 2.7 people each year in North America. In the United States, negligence with a firearm claims between 100 and 200 times that number of lives annually. And beyond the deaths, tens of thousands of other people are accidentally injured as a result of people negligently handling guns. Sharing these facts has led some to accuse me of being, quote, anti-gun. I'm not anti-gun. I'm pro-safety, proficiency, and responsibility, as all gun owners should be. Talking openly and honestly about safety has to be central to our discussion. I'm not here to peddle fantasies. There's already more than enough of that on the internet. My content is for people who are serious about learning how to safely and responsibly enjoy wild spaces. When it comes to guns as defense, whatever works, works. Gun users do miss, but even a missed shot might be enough to startle a bear and discourage aggression. But then again, some shooters mortally wound bears in the bear attacks anyway. Regardless of the gun you choose, realistically, the only shot that is guaranteed to stop a bear is a deep, penetrating hit to the brain or a direct hit to the neck or spinal vertebrae. And even for an expert marksman, those are extremely difficult targets to hit under duress, when a bear is charging at you from 30 plus miles per hour, often through cover. If a bear charges and you are forced to use your gun, it's absolutely possible to make one shot count, but it's more likely going to be a crapshoot, where you pray that enough of your shots make impact with meaningful effect. Which is one of numerous reasons why I strongly caution against gushing like teenage girls at a pop concert every time someone successfully puts down a bear during a charge or an attack. I've been writing about bear attacks long enough to know that survival bias is real, and that sometimes you just get lucky, and sometimes you don't. There are people who do most things right and never make it home. Others do just about everything wrong and survive despite sabotaging themselves. And without fail, the internet seems to always learn the wrong lessons, which is why I make these videos. Gun users need to know, by law, you are required to do whatever is in your power to avoid conflicts with bears before lethal force is considered justified. If you shoot a bear, you must contact wildlife management officers and cooperate with the subsequent investigation. And in Alaska, if you kill a bear in self-defense, you are required to remove the head, pelt, and claws and turn them over to state wildlife managers. I don't say this to discourage you from defending yourself if necessary. If your life is in danger, pull the trigger. But before you get to that point, make sure you understand what that defensive action requires of you. If there's a strong wind, I might pull my gun before bear spray. You'll need to make that call yourself. However, if you've properly layered your defenses by traveling with responsible companions, shooting the bear likely won't be necessary. Group everyone together, try to intimidate the bear by yelling, use bear spray where appropriate, and if necessary, use lethal force. So, to wrap up the letter B, if you are responsible and highly proficient, there is no good reason why you should not carry an appropriate firearm where it is legal to do so. That's why I'll be releasing my video outlining various training routines and suggestions on how to safely and responsibly carry a gun for personal defense in the backcountry. So make sure to stay tuned. I'll also make some more specific suggestions on what types of guns I would and would not recommend at that time, with the reminder that there is no intelligent reason for even the most proficient shooter to not carry and also be proficient with bear spray. Now, you may have noticed that we haven't even talked about whether to fight back or lie down yet. That's because, to quote Tom Smith, you never want a bear to touch you. Adding even a 100-pound bear can tear the crap out of people. Have you ever looked at a bear's claws or jaws? I mean, I think bears are absolutely amazing animals. They're inspirational and a critical part of a healthy ecosystem, and I love a good bear sighting. But I also understand the importance of observing these animals at a safe distance. If you adhere to the A's and B's of bear safety, odds are very good that a bear will never even make contact with you. But, having reached the final page in our survival guide, it's time to discuss best strategies for surviving a bear attack. We'll begin with the assumption that you're by yourself, because if you're attacked, that's almost certainly the case. That, or you're with a dog. If attacked, the rhyme I referenced earlier finally becomes quite useful, with the proviso that black refers to the bear's species and not its fur color, just as brown also refers to the bear's species and not its fur color. This is a brown black bear, and this is a dark-furred brown bear or grizzly, which looks black. It's confusing, I know. So make sure to stay tuned to At Home in Wild Spaces, and we'll clear this up in the future. Surviving a bear attack is a high-stakes game of chance, and there is no guarantee of any particular outcome. But your odds of survival improve dramatically if you pair the right strategy with the right bear, just as your odds of survival plummet if you pair the wrong strategy with the wrong bear. Which brings us to the letter C, combat or cower. If you're attacked by a black bear, chances are you're traveling with a dog or you're dealing with a lone male that is considering you as the entree for his next meal. Because the attack is quite likely predatory, your best play is combat, or as the rhyme advises, fighting back. Your absolute best weapon is an appropriate deterrent in the form of bear spray or the right firearm. But if for whatever reason you don't have either, use whatever you can find. Use rocks, sticks, a pocket knife, punch, kick, target the bear's eyes, nose, throat. Do whatever you can to stay on your feet and convince the bear that the risk is not worth the reward. Kind of like this guy. Not to brag or anything, but I'm actually fluent in hysterical gibberish. This may lose a little something in translation, but this guy is effectively saying, "It sure was dumb of me to leave my bear spray at home. Please don't eat me, Mr. Bear." But in all fairness, he might be saying, "It sure was dumb of me to pack my bear spray in my backpack where I can't get to it." I'm super glad that everything turned out okay for this guy. A contest with a black bear may end quickly or with great effort, depending on how committed the bear is to the attack. There are stories of 80-year-old grandmas fighting black bears off to save their dog, as well as tales of full-grown men in their prime being killed. But a little knowledge and the proper use of the right deterrent puts the odds squarely in your favor. Now, if you are attacked by a brown bear, more commonly known as a grizzly bear, the equation changes dramatically. If attacked by a grizzly, there is a 95% chance you've startled the bear and it has perceived you as a threat to itself, its offspring, or a food source, and is treating you the same way most of you treat spiders, mice, and snakes. While that's not a comforting comparison, it's actually quite appropriate. These are extremely powerful animals, accustomed to life at the top of the food chain, and as I've pointed out previously, an unarmed 1v1 fight between a human and a grizzly always favors the bear. Always. There are some outliers where someone fought off a brown bear with a pocket knife, but not without incurring terrible or even fatal injuries. If you can help it, avoid letting a bear make contact by standing your ground and deploying an appropriate deterrent. If your deterrents fail and contact is unavoidable, turn your back at the last second. Hopefully you're wearing a backpack that can absorb some of the blow. Once you hit the ground, go prone. Lie face down or cower with your arms and hands covering your head and neck, and do your best to lie still and silent. This strategy requires both intelligence and bravery, and it's likely your best shot at surviving. You're in for a hellish experience, enduring crushing but hopefully non-life-threatening injuries. The bear may even attempt to roll you over, which could expose your vitals. Avoid this if possible, but if the bear forces you to roll over, it's broadly advised that you do not resist, but instead roll until you are again face down. Once the bear is satisfied that you are no longer a threat, it should leave the area. Stay put until you're sure the bear is left. Then, if you are able, get your deterrent ready in case the bear returns, and keep it ready as you get up and quietly and calmly leave the area, remaining alert should the bear return. Grizzlies in particular are known for attacking repeatedly as long as they perceive a threat. If you are certain that a brown bear is pursuing you for predatory reasons, then treat it like a polar bear. Polar bears are the most carnivorous member of the bear family, and I'm going to be honest with you. Similar to facing off with a predatory grizzly, your odds of fending off a polar bear without bear spray or an appropriate firearm are not good. This isn't because they're demons or out to kill people. Polar bears exist in one of the most brutal and desolate environments on the planet, and their survival often depends on making the most of what resources they can find. And to a polar bear, you may just qualify as a life-saving resource. Unlike grizzlies and black bears, polar bears are rarely bluffing when they charge. If one darts at you, odds are high that it intends to attack. Without bear spray or an appropriate firearm, your last desperate option is combat. Fight back with whatever you have. Playing dead will do you no good. Punch, kick, target the bear's eyes, nose, throat, anywhere that might be sensitive or vulnerable. You might just get lucky and ward off the bear. It's unlikely, but what other option do you have? Bears are used to going head-to-head with other bears. Even your best hits are not likely to be effective against a grizzly or a polar bear. But there's good news. If you're traveling with companions, as you ought to, there should be help nearby if you need it. One group of 3 or more people is almost guaranteed to not be attacked if everyone stays close together and stands their ground. But if you've separated into, say, 3 groups of 1 rather than one group of 3, it's possible that someone could get attacked. If this happens, ready your deterrents and collectively threaten, spray, or even shoot the bear, with the caution that some bear attack victims have been shot and killed by those attempting to halt the attack with a gun. But group interventions as a whole are usually quite effective. As always, bear spray really is your best first choice for halting an attack with a very high probability of success. If there are only 2 of you, one being attacked and the other able to intervene, then spray the bear in the face, understanding that the person being attacked will likely get sprayed as well. But if I'm being attacked by a bear, I would absolutely prefer to endure a few hours or a day of excruciating pain from bear spray rather than enduring a prolonged bear attack, risking serious or fatal injuries. Clear-minded people will thank you later for using your bear spray, though possibly after the effects of the bear spray wear off. If for whatever reason the bear spray doesn't work, try a gun if you have one. If you don't have bear spray or an appropriate gun, you are going to be pretty helpless if facing off with a grizzly or polar bear. But, like I said, group interventions can be very effective. No one is going to make perfect choices during a crisis, but preparation also yields major dividends during emergencies. If you followed the bear attack ABCs and properly layered your defenses, you'll be in excellent shape to safely and responsibly explore bear country, which is quite honestly a joy. It's my hope that our discussion has helped demystify backcountry safety and tempered the fear so many people harbor towards these animals. So many influencers looking for easy clicks are focused solely on attacks and tragedies to the exclusion of everything else, including informed tips on how to prevent and respond to a bear attack. Yes, bears are powerful and potentially dangerous, but responsible and prepared travelers don't need to fear them. In fact, responsible, prepared travelers will grow to treasure them. I've encountered more bears than I've been able to account in just about every circumstance you could imagine. And you know what? Bears have generally been very responsible, even when showing moderate aggression. That's how they communicate and let you know that you are too close. The purpose of my videos is to help you feel at home in wild spaces. When fear drives us, we miss out on the healing, life-giving gifts that nature offers, and we retreat to humanity's mostly artificial and hollow world, where we remain ignorant of the priceless treasures that are being erased before most of us even become aware of them. We're losing wild spaces. They're being destroyed by development and countless exploitative industries. We're facing some big decisions, particularly as grizzlies reclaim much of their lost range. We can't make intelligent decisions if our understanding is fueled by campfire mythology and fairy tales. People and bears can share space, and for the most part, bears are doing what they can to avoid conflicts. Everyone benefits when people do the same. As we wrap up, I again want to thank our Patreon supporters. You guys are amazing. If you want to be part of something special, then make sure to share this video and join our team on Patreon. I also want to thank Dr. Tom Smith for generously sharing his time and expertise. And until next time, this is Mike, reminding you to layer your understanding of the world around you, as well as your backcountry defenses.